In the sprawling expanse of the Tarmine wastes, life was as harsh as the blistering winds that swept across the barren plains. The sun was a relentless overseer, scorching anything daring enough to venture during daylight. Amidst this unforgiving landscape, a tiny creature, barely visible against the vast backdrop of dust and rock, clung desperately to life. The creature, an infant Furzin, was a species known for their thick, soft fur and large, expressive eyes, traits that should have endeared them to many. However, in the harsh realities of space colonization and interstellar survival, cuteness was a negligible commodity. The Furzin was abandoned, its cries swallowed by the vast, indifferent desert. Days passed with the infant struggling for survival, its small form growing increasingly weak. It was on one particularly scorching day that fate, or perhaps chance, altered its course. A figure appeared on the horizon, a silhouette against the glaring sun, growing steadily larger, a human mercenary known as Kale Travers. Kale was a formidable figure, his body clad in a patchwork of armor and cloth, each piece telling the tale of 1,000 battles and close calls. His face was rugged, with a sharp jawline and eyes that missed nothing. Yet it was not his appearance but his reputation that kept most at bay. Kale was known across the sectors as a man who completed his contracts by any means necessary. On this day, his path had unexpectedly brought him to the dying Furzin. His mission was simple: traverse the Tarmine wastes to secure a rare mineral sample for a shadowy corporate entity. The creature was merely a blip in his otherwise straightforward path. Yet, as Kale drew closer, his seasoned eyes caught the slight movement of the Furzin's chest, a sign of life against all odds. Something in the sight of the helpless creature stirred a long-buried semblance of compassion in his hardened heart. He paused, considering the impracticality of what he was contemplating. After a brief internal struggle, Kale made his decision. He knelt beside the Furzin, offering water from his supply. The creature's large eyes flickered open, meeting his with a gaze filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. "All right, little one," Kale murmured, his voice rough but not unkind. "Looks like you're with me now." Securing the Furzin inside his coat, Kale continued his journey across the wasteland, the tiny creature now a new and unexpected companion. As they traveled, the Furzin began to show signs of recovery, its small body gradually warming against Kale's chest. What Kale had yet to realize was that this seemingly inconsequential choice was about to lead him into a series of events that would not only challenge his notions of survival and morality, but also unravel secrets that spanned the stars. The Furzin, as frail as it appeared, carried within it a legacy and a destiny that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. As night fell, and the stars blanketed the sky, Kale looked down at the creature now asleep against him, its breathing steady and calm. In that quiet moment, under the watchful eyes of distant suns, a bond began to form, a bond that might one day alter the course of their very lives. Kale's path took him deeper into the desolate regions of the Tarmine wastes. The Furzin tucked securely within his coat, its tiny heartbeat a soft thrum against his chest. The landscape around them was a monochrome tableau of gray and rust, punctuated occasionally by the stark skeletons of failed settlements and the twisted metal of derelict spacecraft. As they ventured on, Kale maintained a vigilant eye, scanning for any signs of the marauders known to haunt these parts. His hand rested near the blaster holstered at his side, a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows of the rocks and dunes. Suddenly, a blip on his wrist-mounted scanner pulled his attention. A signal, weak and intermittent, that suggested something more than the typical background noise of the wasteland. Adjusting the settings, Kale honed in on the source, his steps guided by the rhythmic pulse of the signal. The Furzin, sensing the shift in its protector's focus, stirred restlessly. Kale soothed it with a gentle pat, his mind racing as he pieced together the potential implications of the signal. Could it be other survivors, marauders, or something else entirely? The signal led them to the remains of an ancient ship, half swallowed by the sand, its hull corroded and battered by the elements. The emblem of a forgotten expedition was still visible, a ghostly imprint on its side. Cale approached cautiously, his scanner humming softly as it mapped the area for any signs of life or danger. Inside the ship, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of metal and old electronics. Cale's light pierced the darkness, revealing a cockpit cluttered with debris and the faded remains of control panels. It was here, among the scattered remnants of a long-lost crew, that the signal was strongest. He knelt to examine a small, dust-covered device that was the source of the signal, a data recorder, perhaps crucial to understanding what had happened here. As he reached out to retrieve it, a sudden noise made him freeze. A soft, metallic whirring came from the depths of the ship, followed by a faint light flickering in the distance. With the Furzen secure in his pocket, Cale drew his blaster and moved toward the light. His footsteps were silent, a skill honed by years of navigating dangerous terrains. The light grew stronger, illuminating a section of the ship that seemed less affected by decay. Here the walls were lined with cryopods, their contents obscured by frosted glass. Cale wiped away the frost from the nearest pod to reveal a figure inside, suspended in stasis. The technology was advanced, far beyond what any typical scavenger or settler could afford. Who were these people? And what was their mission? As he pondered these questions, the Furzen began to emit a series of soft clicks, a sound Cale had never heard it make before. The creature seemed to be reacting to the stasis pods, its body vibrating with each sound. Was it possible that the Furzen was somehow connected to these people, or even to this ship? Cale's thoughts were interrupted by another noise, this one loud and unmistakable, the sound of approaching footsteps. He turned, blaster ready, as figures emerged from the shadows, their intentions yet unclear. The standoff was brief. The figures halted, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We mean no harm," one of them called out, stepping forward into the light. "We're here for the same reason you are. The signal." Cale eyed them warily, his mind racing with possibilities and potential strategies. Trust was a luxury seldom afforded in the wasteland, and yet the presence of these strangers and their apparent... As the strangers cautiously approached, their leader, a woman with sharp features and keen eyes, extended a device towards Cale. "We tracked this signal here, same as you. Our scanner picked up an anomalous reading not native to any known tech in this sector," she explained, her voice steady but curious. Cale lowered his blaster slightly but did not holster it. The Furzen peeked out from his coat, its clicks growing more frequent as the woman spoke. "What do you know about the ship?" Cale asked, his gaze shifting from the woman to the others who stood behind her, a mix of humans and androids, all armed but holding their weapons at ease. "This is the Venturer, lost over a century ago on a mission to explore uncharted territories beyond the Outer Rim. It was carrying something valuable, something many believed to be a myth," the woman replied, her eyes flicking to the Furzen as she spoke. Cale felt a chill, the weight of the revelation settling on him. "And the myth?" he pressed, his curiosity piqued. "The myth of the oraculum," she said, the word hanging between them like a specter. "It's said to be an ancient artifact capable of accessing vast stores of knowledge, possibly from before the time of the Galactic Council." The Furzen's clicks intensified, and Cale noticed a faint glow emanating from within its fur. He studied the creature, its behavior unmistakably reactive to the discussion of the artifact. Why would the Venturer carry such an artifact? And why here in the Tarmine Wastes? Cale's questions mirrored the confusion and skepticism that clouded his thoughts. The woman stepped closer, her expression earnest. "We believe the crew discovered the oraculum and understood its power. Maybe they chose to hide it here, in one of the least accessible places, to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands." Cale considered this. The galaxy was rife with factions that would kill for such power. It made a twisted kind of sense to bury it in the wastes. "You're here to retrieve it," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes, and we could use your help," she replied. "You've already faced the perils of this wasteland and survived. Together we have a better chance of uncovering the artifact and protecting it." Cale looked down at the Furzen, its glow now subsiding.
This creature is connected to the oraculum, isn't it? He asked, piecing together the erratic puzzle in his mind. The woman nodded. We think it may be a bioengineered key, designed to interact with the oraculum systems. It's likely the crew of the Venturer engineered it from local fauna, adapting it to serve as a safeguard for the artifact. A truce formed silently between them, a mutual understanding of the stakes involved. Kale agreed to join the group, driven by a mix of self-interest and a newfound responsibility towards the Furry. As they prepared to delve deeper into the ship, the air grew cooler and more electric, the ship seeming to hum with dormant energy. They reached the heart of the Venturer, where a large spherical chamber dominated the space. At its center, suspended by beams of light, was a crystalline object, the oraculum. The Furry reacted immediately, leaping from Kale's grasp and floating towards the artifact as if drawn by an invisible force. It touched the crystal, and the chamber lit up with holographic data streams. As the holograms danced around them, casting the chamber into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow, Kale's mind raced. The information flowing from the oraculum was vast, detailing forgotten technologies and lost civilizations. The group watched, transfixed, as the Furry interacted with the artifact, its small body a conduit for the ancient data. The woman, whom Kale learned was named Ilara, directed her team to start cataloging the data streams. This could change everything, she murmured, both excitement and fear palpable in her voice. She glanced at Kale, who was still watching the Furry. It's reacting as if it was made for this, she observed. Kale nodded, his gaze never leaving the creature. It's more than just a key, he said. It's part of the oraculum, maybe its guardian or caretaker. We need to ensure it stays protected. Ilara agreed, and together they began planning how to secure the site. The revelation that such power could fall into the wrong hands was a risk too great. As they discussed, the Furry continued its work, occasionally pausing as if to ensure its human counterparts were keeping pace. Suddenly, the chamber shook, dust and debris cascading from above. We're not alone, Kale said, pulling his blaster as he turned toward the chamber's entrance. Ilara signaled her team, who quickly moved into defensive positions around the oraculum. The intruders were swift, a band of raiders known for their brutality and greed. They stormed into the chamber, weapons drawn, eyes greedy at the sight of the oraculum. Step away from the artifact and you may yet live, their leader barked, a nasty grin splitting his face. Kale and Ilara exchanged a quick glance, a silent agreement passing between them. They would not surrender the oraculum or the Furry. The standoff was tense, each side measuring the other, calculating chances and strategies. Without warning, the Furry emitted a high-pitched sound, the holograms fluctuating wildly in response. The raiders flinched, confusion breaking their focus. Kale took the opportunity, opening fire, his shots precise and disabling. Ilara and her team followed suit, their trained coordination and superior positioning giving them the upper hand. The battle was over quickly, but not without cost. Several of Ilara's team were injured, and the chamber had suffered damage, threatening the stability of the structure. We need to move the oraculum, Ilara said urgently, assessing the damage. It's not safe here anymore, Kale agreed. We'll need a plan to transport it, and a destination in mind, somewhere secure, away from those who would use it for harm. The Furry seemed to sense their urgency, its interactions with the oraculum becoming more deliberate, as if to stabilize the artifact for transport. Ilara's team, despite their injuries, rallied, their mission clear. Together, they devised a quick strategy to move the oraculum. Using anti-grav sleds from their ship, they secured the artifact, the Furry never leaving its side, always touching the crystalline surface, ensuring its calm. As they exited the crumbling ship, the stars above blanketed the sky, a silent audience to their burdened procession. The desert of the Tarmine wastes stretched under the relentless expanse of stars. The team moved swiftly across the Tarmine wastes. Their path was illuminated only by the soft glow of the anti-grav sleds and the occasional flare from one of the team's torches. Kale kept close to the oraculum, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of pursuit. Beside him,
The Furzin maintained its constant contact with the artifact, its presence seemingly essential to keeping the ancient technology stable. Ilara led the way, her map projected in a holographic display from her wrist device. "There's an old research facility on the edge of the Nocturne Plains," she explained over the comms. "It's been abandoned for decades, but it should serve as a temporary stronghold until we can secure a more permanent location." The idea of moving into an abandoned facility was less than ideal, but Kale knew they had few options. The Nocturne Plains offered a strategic advantage with its difficult terrain and low visibility, providing them cover from potential trackers. As they traveled, Kale found himself often glancing at the Furzin, marveling at its connection to the Oraculum. He wondered about the origins of such a creature, bioengineered to be both key and guardian to such a profound repository of knowledge. The creature seemed aware of its importance, its eyes occasionally meeting Kale's with an intelligence that belied its small, unassuming form. The facility emerged on the horizon, a silhouette against the lesser darkness of the night, a sprawling complex of buildings overtaken by the desert sands, its outer walls still intact, but bearing the scars of time and neglect. "We'll need to fortify the entrances and set up a perimeter," Ilara ordered as they approached. Her team, despite the fatigue that clung to them like the desert dust, moved into action, unloading equipment and securing the area. Inside, the facility was a labyrinth of corridors and rooms filled with the detritus of abandoned projects and old technologies. Kale and a few others scouted ahead, clearing the space of any potential hazards and retrieving anything that could be used to bolster their defenses. Meanwhile, the Furzin had become unusually still, its gaze fixed on a particular room deep within the facility. Kale followed its line of sight and discovered a room lined with old server banks, their lights flickering weakly in the gloom. "Looks like some of the power is still on," he noted, stepping inside to inspect the equipment. The Furzin hopped down and approached one of the servers, its small paws lifting to touch the casing. Instantly the room hummed to life, lights brightening as if the facility recognized the presence of its new occupants. "This could work," Kale said, more to himself than to anyone else. "If we can get these systems operational, we might be able to create a more robust defense network, maybe even access old surveillance protocols." Ilara joined him, her expression a mix of amazement and concern. "Let's hope the facility's old security measures are enough to hold off any further attacks until we can get the word out to our allies," she said. As they set to work, the team's tech specialist began interfacing with the facility's systems, guided by the Furzin's reactions to the servers. It seemed to instinctively know which systems were critical and how to activate them, further proof of its incredible design. Kale stood watch, his mind restless. The weight of their discovery and the responsibility of guarding it weighed heavily on him. Yet there was a part of him that felt a profound sense of purpose, a clarity he hadn't experienced in his years of wandering the galaxy as a mercenary. In the depths of that abandoned facility, surrounded by the echoes of past endeavors and the silent vigil of the stars, a new chapter was beginning for Kale and his unlikely allies. Here, in the shadow of forgotten knowledge, and guarded by a creature. As the night deepened into the cold hues of pre-dawn, the facility's defense systems hummed to life, a low and reassuring drone that filled the halls. The tech team had made significant progress, and with the Furzin's uncanny ability to interact with the technology, they had managed to activate a shield generator, casting a protective dome over the facility. Ilara coordinated with her team, establishing communication relays and setting up surveillance drones to patrol the perimeter. The facility was becoming a fortress, albeit temporarily, a sanctuary in the vastness of the Tarmine wastes. Kale took a moment to watch the Furzin as it moved through the server room. It paused occasionally, its small body vibrating slightly as it interfaced with the facility's systems. Each time it touched a console, the screens flickered, displaying fragments of data and maps that were likely decades old, but now invaluable to their cause. Outside, the first light of dawn crept across the horizon, casting long shadows over the sand. It was during these early hours that the facility's sensors picked up an anomaly. The perimeter alarms triggered, a shrill sound that cut through the quiet. Kale was immediately on alert, grabbing his weapon and heading to the command center. Ilara was already there, her eyes fixed on the monitor. "We've got incoming," she announced, her voice calm but tense. The screen showed a group of vehicles, heavily armored and moving fast towards their location. "Looks like the raiders aren't giving up," she added grimly. Kale felt a surge of adrenaline. "How long until they're on us?" "Less than 20 minutes," one of the techs replied, adjusting the display to show their approaching foes. The team sprang into action, taking positions at strategic points around the facility. Kale joined a group by the main entrance, his eyes scanning the desert landscape as it began to brighten with the morning light. The Furzin seemed to sense the urgency, its behavior becoming more agitated. It scurried to Kale's side, tugging at his pants leg, then darting back toward the server room. Understanding the creature's intent, Kale followed. Inside the server room, the Furzin leaped onto a console, its paws activating sequences of commands. On the screen, a schematic of the facility layout appeared alongside the defense capabilities they hadn't yet activated. "Smart little guy," Kale muttered, watching as the Furzin initiated a series of defensive protocols. Turrets emerged from concealed compartments in the facility's exterior, targeting the incoming vehicles. As the raiders closed in, the first volley of turret fire was unleashed, striking the lead vehicles and slowing their advance. The raiders returned fire, their weapons blasting against the facility's shields, which flickered but held. Back in the command center, Ilara coordinated their defense, her voice a steady stream of commands and updates. Kale fought alongside his group, firing at the raiders who had begun to dismount and attempt an on-foot assault. The battle raged under the rising sun, the desert echoing with the sounds of gunfire and explosions. Through it all, the Furzin continued to manipulate the facility's systems, bolstering their defenses and sealing breaches in the shield. Eventually, the raiders' numbers dwindled, their resolve broken as they realized the fortress would not be taken easily. The last of their vehicles turned and retreated, disappearing into the dust from which they had come. As silence fell over the facility, Kale allowed himself a brief moment to breathe.